Well, it had to happen at some point, and it is here. At least in my neck of the woods, the market is totally shifting. Let's talk about it. What I want to break down in these next two videos, this one right here and one coming up, is why the market is shifting, how this is going to impact your real estate business, like on an actual marketing and conversion level, and what we can really begin doing about it. So at least in my area, I'm here selling right now in Phoenix, Scottsdale, Arizona. Things have changed super dramatically over the last 6 weeks. We went through a totally spring seller frenzy to looking at a potential buyer's market in our area within the next 60 days, which is changing at breakneck speed. Like, that is totally nuts. Now, with the economy and the housing market being in recovery and expansion over the last, at least 8 years, it's no surprise that we're finally here really seeing a shift, especially after what we've seen in the last 2 years. So let's break down a little bit why this is happening, just in case this is news to you, because I recognize that some parts of the country are probably still very competitive and might be a little bit slower to see some of the changes that we are seeing, at least in my area. There are a couple of factors specifically creating the shift that we're seeing right now. The first one is clearly the interest rates. The Fed announced earlier this year that they want to reset the housing market, and it looks like they're getting their wish. We've seen interest rates for most borrowers raise about 2.5% since about April. For the average homeowner, that can translate to about $800 of an increase to their monthly payment. So it doesn't take a genius to determine how this is actually going to impact buyer demand in our areas. And at least where I'm at, we have seen slightly higher buyer demand, but not demand that has been completely uncontrollably out of the norm. What we've actually seen is such a drastic low supply of inventory that as soon as that buyer demand was curbed by the rise in interest rates, we immediately began to see a shift in the market. So that was number one. Now, while that was happening, we also saw a drastic change to just overall affordability in our economy over the last 6 months. Inflation is at an all-time high. The Russia-Ukraine situation really threw oil and gas out of whack, and that is also going to impact supply chain at every stage, increasing costs along the way. And so not only are many home buyers and potential home buyers looking at their affordability being throttled by rising interest rates, they're also seeing the cost of effectively everything rise at the same time, while their wages are not necessarily rising at the same pace. Now, as these two factors really started to shift the market, we then saw sellers beginning to panic. At least in my area, we saw a stampede of sellers running to market because they saw this stuff happening and they were terrified that home values were going to tank. And so they wanted to sell, if they had been on the fence, as quickly as they could to still capitalize at or near peak pricing. Now, again, if you have not seen this type of thing happening in your market just yet, there's nothing to say that it's not headed your way, because a lot of times this does take a little while to affect different parts of the country, and some areas that are hotter than others are going to be impacted a little bit differently. Here in my area in Phoenix, we still have a lot of demand. We still have relatively low inventory, but again, this hit our market so quickly that it was really challenging for a lot of our sellers to adjust expectations. And at the same time, buyers were seeing so many changes so quickly that they kind of stalled altogether. So all this to say, there's a lot going on. It's kind of a chaotic time in real estate. And this is our time to make sure that our marketing and business practices are going to be reflective of what we're seeing on the ground. So what can we expect going forward? For me specifically, as a real estate agent in a market that is seeing a very drastic market shift right now, I am expecting a lot of uncertainty that is going to make it really difficult for my clients to make decisions. Anytime we see a lot of these changes, we see home buyers and sellers pause in their decision making, because they're experiencing more stress and fear around the decision-making process that is already a difficult one to begin with. And so we have to expect that until things start to settle or feel like a new normal, we have to expect there to be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of hesitancy in our clients. This means we are going to start coming across new objections that maybe if you're a newer agent who has only been in the business over the last 3 years or less, you haven't had to deal with before. We can expect a lot of buyers and sellers kind of counting themselves out from the game before they ever even get to the table with you, right? Just kind of looking at national news headlines and deciding that it's not their time to make a move and not even reaching out to you to start with. We can also expect our pipeline of clients to start hitting the sidelines, right? So if you've been working with some of those like sure thing buyers or sellers, they're second guessing themselves and they're not sure if they want to move forward with the plans that you may have felt like were already established. Now, all that being said, if we can understand and anticipate the challenges that we are going to be facing through the last half of the year, we can start to prepare our business and really ourselves to meet and overcome that adversity. So here's what you need to be doing now. Right now, as the market begins shifting, you have to become a data scientist. I mean, maybe not completely, but every single day I am pulling up my market numbers. I am looking at the data, I'm looking at what's being published, I'm looking at what's happening to the MLS, like what inventory is doing, and I'm really taking a discerning look at the leading and lagging measures so that I have an understanding of what is going to be coming for my clients. Now, I want you to understand why this is so important. If you are speaking with a seller, for example, and you are trying to get them off the fence and ready to sell their home, they've got a couple of questions in their mind. Their questions are, can I sell my home? Should I sell my home now? And what is the best approach to selling my home in this current environment? Sellers don't necessarily understand how to look at the market data the same way you and I might because they're not real estate experts, right? They don't do this stuff day to day. And a lot of times the only numbers they understand to look at are closed listings in their area, right? They might be looking up Zillow to see what their neighbors sold for 3 months ago. But really in any market, 3 months ago was a totally different story. 6 months ago, completely different story. And you're going to have a little bit of an uphill battle having to explain to sellers why they might not want to list as aggressively as their neighbor who maybe even had a smaller home did in the height of the spring frenzy. For example, the more you understand the difference between the leading and lagging measures in your market, the more you can interpret the data that matters today that can help you guys make decisions for the future. And so number one, that's what I'm doing every single day. I am monitoring the data, preparing myself for really potentially challenging conversations with buyers and sellers every single day. Data is going to help you see through fear and uncertainty every single time. Once you understand what is actually happening on the ground in your real estate market, you can then start making decisions on how you want to market your solutions in regards to that environment to your buyers and sellers. So in the next video, part 2 of this little series, what I would like to do is actually share how we need to be marketing the market shift to our database and to social media. So now that we have a pretty good understanding that like, the market is shifting, even if you're not really feeling it quite yet in your area, it's probably coming. We can get ahead of the curve now. Meet with me during this next video to talk about how we are going to adjust our marketing plans on and off social media. Now, while this next video is going to have a lot of tactical, juicy stuff, like really action-based steps that you can take to fortify your business. By the way, be sure to subscribe to this channel if you don't. I don't want you to miss that next video next week, part 2 to this. I also don't want to leave you hanging between now and then. So if you haven't yet, go down to the show notes, the caption of this video. I actually have a free ebook linked below that is going to walk you through the 12 rules to live by as an attraction-based real estate agent. It is a collection of the rules that I have learned over the last nearly decade in business, and I think that a lot of those lessons are going to serve us really well as we start to see our first market contraction in a while. So definitely download that ebook, give that a read, and then loop back with me next week to really put some plans in place for solid action. Hang in there. We can do this. You've done hard things before, and you are resilient enough to navigate any of the waters that are ahead. Thanks so much for tuning in. Keep on crushing it.